Everybody, I'm Lynn Gaddis, and I am here with a group of our partners in the Illinois Teacher Leadership Network, and we're going to share our story and what we've learned and what messages we can share with you about our experience. And so without any further ado, let's just get started.
Honey, you can turn on the TV. I'm sitting out here so the TV can be on too. I want to do both.
What? Turn on the TV and what?
I don't want you to think you have to be quiet. Go ahead and turn it on.
I don't have to be quiet?
Uh-uh.
You're not going to have sound?
I have it on mute.
Well, I'm going to go downstairs and work on some laundry. And
Oh, all right.
You can be like,
Oh, it just happened.
be quiet.
Lynn, we are not hearing you.
Lori, am I on mute?
Yeah, you were on mute. I'm very sorry. You are no longer on mute, so go.
I'll start again. Welcome, everybody. I'm here with a group of people who are partners, key partners in our Illinois Teacher Leadership Network. And let's just get started and have a start to do introductions. We'll start with Roger.
So you have to unmute yourself to speak. Roger, I can unmute you because I don't know if you know how to do that. No, you're the only one who doesn't have to unmute yourself.
Okay, let's move on to Jason.
Good evening. My name is Jason Helfer, and I serve as the Deputy Superintendent for Teaching and Learning with the Illinois State Board of Education.
And Cinda.
Good evening. I'm Cinda Klickna, President of the Illinois Education Association, and taught English for many years.
Pam.
Pam Riley, good evening. I work as a teacher leader support for instructional coaches in K through 8 at Palos Heights School District, and also P20 Teacher and Leader Effectiveness Committee.
And Roger. Roger is the director of the Illinois Association of School Boards, and we'll hope he comes through in just a moment. And I'm Lynn Gaddis. I'm the president of the Illinois State Teachers of the Year and finalists, and I work with Pam Riley and have worked with Joe Fothery, Brian Curtin, and Anna Sprave in leadership team of the Illinois Teacher Leadership Network. So let's start by first having everybody jump into the chat room. And if you would, just for about 30 seconds, jot down some ideas of why you're on this webinar or what you'd hope to learn tonight. So let's take about 30 to 40 seconds to jump in and get our thinking going. So as I'm reading what's showing up on the screen, some people are from Illinois wanting to know more about what it is that the Teacher Leadership Network is doing. And I'm seeing people from other states who are trying to get things going in their states and wanting to learn more about how that has, if they can learn from what we've been doing in Illinois. Okay. Well, let me give you an overview of what we are going to talk about, but keep posting your questions or your thoughts as we go. First, Pam and I are going to give a brief history, and then all our panelists will be talking about lessons learned and any advice that they have for teacher leaders in working with other people from other groups. And then what message of teacher leadership we think is really key for us to share as we move forward. So let me start with Pam, and I'll let you talk a little bit about the history of how we became the Illinois Teacher Leadership Network.
Okay. Well, in 2014, we began gathering information about teacher leadership in Illinois, and what we gathered was that we have these teacher leadership endorsement programs that are offered through our universities, and now we're up to 25. And there were some school districts that were sprinkled across Illinois that had teacher leadership components, but nothing systemic across our state. So in December of 2014, 5 of our ILSTOI members as the Illinois State Teachers of the Year created a proposal to attend the very first Teach to Lead Summit by the United States Department of Ed in Kentucky. And when there, we really worked on our proposal, and they helped push our thinking. And in May of 2015, the Department of Ed chose our proposal as a learning lab, so they came to Illinois, and we invited 21 Illinois education organizations to join us. And when they received the invitation from Secretary Duncan, they came to the Illinois State Board of Education. And from that lab resulted in 6 commitments to teacher leadership in Illinois. And they asked ILSTOI to continue to lead that charge of teacher leadership in our state. So that's how we started.
So I give you this page to kind of share with you what we've done in 1 year, which is pretty amazing. I'm not going to read all of it, but you can go to our website for ITLN, which is housed at the ILSTOI site. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see our website. It's going to show up on every screen. But we've been working on building a message, and in that message, we needed to create all these different documents so that we would all have the similar common language in talking about teacher leadership. And so all of these different documents and what we've been finding are found on our website. So we're very excited that we've developed that message, and we're looking forward to what we can do next. In the meantime, we've been working very hard to visit many other or get engaged with some national connections and bring that to ITLN. So I'll let Pam talk about our national connections.
So the next 2 slides, we're going to show connections that we've made nationally to help inform and drive our work for ITLN, and we have several different members. Those 21 organizations I was talking about that have been also engaged in national connections in the events or conferences that are listed here. So we have the P20 Council Teacher and Leader Effectiveness Committee, and that committee is preschool through adulthood education, and we report back to the governor on recommendations. We went to the National Teacher Leader Summit in February, and that was born out of the International Summit from Canada that we were going to hold the first Teacher Leader Summit. We also are involved with the CCSSO Teacher Leadership Working Action Group. So Jason Helfer asked Lynn and I to do that work, and we have monthly webinars and developed a 30, 60, 90-day plan. You want to go to the next slide? There you go. We also attended the Teaching and Learning Conference in March. And those monthly meetings that we've had with the CCSSO, we were finally able to meet face-to-face there, the other states, and collaborate on their teacher leadership as well. We attended the Teach to Lead Summit in New Orleans. Cinda Klickna was part of that as well. And we have another proposal there working on bringing summits to Illinois for our school district. We're also part of Leading Educators State Toolkit meeting, coming up with a statewide toolbox for our state, and we'll be convening again in August. So we've really been doing a lot, and the work that we've been doing, we always bring it back to ITLN and hope that it'll improve our work. So what's next for us is that we hope from the Teach to Lead Summit that we were just at in New Orleans, we are hoping to host 3 to 5 powered by Teach to Lead Summits in Illinois, and the Department of Ed will collaborate with us on that. Now we're searching for grant funding. We're going to meet in August to continue to support all of our work and then also to report back on these national connections. We are going to develop a framework for teacher leadership in Illinois and create a communication plan. That's what came out of our last meeting just this past week, August 12th.
And so you saw where we were doing the communication plan. This gives us our to-do list, all those bullets you saw on the other page. And then I put a few bullets here that shares what's going to be in that communication plan. But getting the message out was something that we found when we were gathering information about Illinois, trying to get people to be aware of then all of the things that we've created that give us that common language. And so this will be the work of ITLN over the next year, including moving forward on the summits. So at this time, if you have any questions or thoughts, let's take a couple minutes to get any thoughts that you have or questions. I've got 2 already, but I'd like to take some wait time to see if there's any more. One of the questions was, how did we gather the information for that 1 year in 2014? We just went and called up people, and Cinda was one, Roger and Jason, and we met with the state superintendent and with the school superintendent organization and the principals association and all kinds of other people that are now members of our group, and just went and asked very simple questions of what's going on with teacher leadership. And what we found was that at the state policy level, what we found was the teacher leadership endorsement had just taken hold, had been designed in 20 universities, now have programs for that will help teachers to get the teacher leadership endorsement, but there was lots of unknowns about that, and then also that there were some districts that were doing some things. Someone else asked a question about funding, and what's kind of fun about our funding is that the network supports itself. We have no grants or funding, but we move our meetings from place to place and people host them. Others pay for lunch when we have full day meetings. We just had ours at IEA, IASB, and IPA have paid for lunches, as well as the superintendent group. IFT was the one who hosted the last one. So everybody takes turns and has been very supportive, and so that is where our funding comes from. But as you heard Pam say, that it may be time to start writing some grants if we are to hold the summits this year.
Lynn, did you see, Whitney Cruz had an interesting question. Is it better to charter an official state chapter for leadership or to create an informal group, or which would you do first?
Well, the ITLN is separate from our state chapter, but I will say that having a state chapter really helped us to be able to work with all the other organizations. So when we could say we were a chapter and we had organization and members, it helped us to be able to work with others. If you start with an informal group, and I think some states have done this, but it would be great to move toward the chapter to be able to do that work. Okay, well, here's our first question for our panelists. So I'm going to ask them each to take a turn talking about what lessons have you learned about teacher leadership from the 1 year as a member of the Illinois Teacher Leader Network.
So this is Cinda Klickna. I think the one thing that I've learned is that there is so much happening around the country with discussion and work in teacher leadership. Not just here in Illinois, but the U.S. Department of Ed, the National Education Association, and other of the state affiliates within NEA. A lot of people are talking about what is teacher leadership and how can we promote it. I learned that in our state, when you have a group of people who come together and start talking about it, and they have an idea and then build upon it, and if you just take a look at all of the organizations that are involved with ITLN, to bring that kind of diverse group together, all caring about education, has been a real key to pushing this forward. I think in our conversations, you know, we've had a lot of talk about what is the real definition. And so I've kind of boiled it down from our documents that a teacher leader is a trained, effective educator who works on student achievement. It could be in a formal or informal role, but it's really to impact practice, policy, and advocacy for student success. And the goal then is to develop a sustainable culture within and across districts and the state so that teacher leadership is embraced, supported, and promoted. I think that what I've also learned is we need to step back a bit and take a look at where teacher leadership is happening and look at the very diverse roles and job descriptions. I think that we tend to peg it into certain roles like a literacy coach, but the work really spans many different types of roles. And so I think that we have some areas where they've used teacher leadership, but maybe have not vetted properly or chosen properly. And so if the criteria for selection is really not clear, you could end up with a situation where people say these people are handpicked favorites. And that's something we need to definitely avoid. There has to be support and there has to be professional development. And teacher leadership has to be talked about, implemented correctly, and highlighted as a way for teachers to use their expertise and skills for students so they don't have to leave the classroom. And so there's so many things that pull into that. I say if a group got together and just started talking, it can build. So I'll end there.
Thanks, Cinda. Jason or Roger?
Yeah, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, this is Roger Eddy. Sorry about that earlier. I guess one of the two of us had it on mute. Yeah, you know, I've learned really about the potential that exists to use the talent and really kind of the capacity that our schools have in a kind of a more organized and meaningful manner. I think there have always been teacher leaders, and in most districts you could identify who those folks are, but there's kind of lacked the type of formal understanding of their role and the training, as Cinda said, that might make this more effective. So I think, you know, the willingness of teachers to take that role seriously with the right supports is an important possibility for our state, especially given the other difficulties that we have related to, you know, trying to provide the support mechanisms necessary for our teachers. There's just a tremendous amount of potential there. We've got to work through the formal, the formal application of this, but I've also learned, as Cinda mentioned, there's great value in getting everyone together in the same room so that we can talk about the things that we really agree on and maybe set aside some of the things we have concerns about, talk those out, but then figure out a way to make this work so that that talent can be used to support teaching and learning.
Thank you, Roger. Jason?
I think what I've learned is that teacher leadership is both dynamic and very diverse in Illinois. I'm continually amazed and inspired by the work that I see teachers doing on behalf of their profession and on behalf of their children and their communities. And the work in the last year, meeting so many people from different organizations and that are engaged in teacher leadership, has really taught me, like Cinda and Roger had mentioned, that when you get a good group of people together who are all focusing on a common goal, maybe initially not having the same common understandings, but working through that, some really powerful things can happen.
Thanks, Jason. And Pam? Is she on mute?
Three panelists have all said some wonderful things, so I'm following them. I would echo what they've said, and also that this collaboration has been really important to me, and getting the different perspectives of teacher leadership through each different lens of all of the organizations has been very helpful in what resources they can bring to the table.
And I would just add that it's about relationships, but also going into the idea of the ITLN group owning the work so that it's owned by the group. So we have had a wonderful collaboration that as we've moved through to produce all these documents and get that common language, and now having the commitment to seeing the summits take place, that we've always brought things to the group as teacher leaders, but that the group and all of the individual organizations, but then as a collective, have made the decisions. So the to-do lists, the lists of priority actions, they've always been developed by the ITLN, by the whole network, so that we've accomplished a lot of things in a short amount of time. The other piece is that as I would give advice as we're looking at what I've learned, I've also learned that you've got to do the grunt work, but you have to keep the ownership with the group. So as I'm looking at any questions, when somebody's asking me what I mean by them owning the group, what I would say is that I mean that it isn't one small group of leaders getting the agenda together. The agenda is determined almost by the time we leave the previous meeting, or the group then decides what the actions are. And we do a lot of facilitated agendas to make sure we have the words and the thoughts of the whole group. Okay, let me give our participants a minute to jot any ideas or to ask any questions. Any comments in the chat room that would help us clarify some things.
Cheryl has an interesting question, Lynn, and the group, anyone in the group I guess could answer. She says, are we discussing teacher leadership that's solely defined by having the teacher leader endorsement or coursework through university rather than being an NBCT or having specific endorsement in administration or curriculum development, etc.?
I don't mind responding to that. This is Cinda. In fact, that came up at our last meeting. We kind of dug into that. But, you know, the question was, is credentialing necessary, or when? When does it occur and how? Because could you come into teacher leadership work and then get credentialed? Do you have to get credentialed first? my personal view is that we have teachers who are nationally board certified or have other expertise and are, you know, in a situation where they're chosen correctly to help with curriculum development or other things. And to say that you have to first get an endorsement before you can do some of these things, you know, I think those are things we're going to have to talk about and weigh. But, you know, it's what comes first, credentialing or leadership work. And I can say in my own experience, I worked on curriculum development in my district. I didn't have a credential to do that. And yet, you know, the work itself helps you get even better as a leader. So that's just some of my thoughts on it.
Let me follow up a little bit. This is Roger, because I really agree with Cinda on this, that, and I stated earlier, I think there have always been those who either by a formal method or just simply by default become teacher leaders. I think we've always had those. I know I taught and we knew who those folks were, but I think it's valuable for us to formalize this so that there's more of a recognition and there's also more training available. So whether the credential is you know, formal, there probably needs to be a greater recognition of who those folks are and what their contribution is in some manner. Now in Illinois, we have pending a licensure methodology that is being worked up to that I think will add to this, but I also don't know that in all cases that's going to be necessary for a district to identify those leaders. I think it's good that we're doing it, but I think there are always going to be districts who have individuals assume those roles, and they may not necessarily be completely certified or licensed in that role.
And there was one. There's one. Go ahead, Pam.
When we did the surveys in Illinois, and I asked districts if they require their teacher leaders to hold the teacher leadership endorsement, 95% said no. They don't require that endorsement for them to hold those leadership roles.
And Alan brought up a good point. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? And the point is that if we say right now, we had this discussion when we were coming up with a definition. The word credentialed was in the definition and then taken out because at the stage we're at right now, do we require everyone to be a credentialed teacher leader and get rid of all these formal and informal roles that teachers have now? Or is this something that we aspire to in the future as we create systems for that to happen? So I would ask Jason, this might be a good point for you to share a little bit about the pending legislation for the model teacher leader standards, the teacher leader model standards alignment.
Sure. So one of the things that in one of our previous meetings that we talked about was trying to figure out what does it mean to be a teacher leader. And that's where I think you're hearing comments from some of the panelists about it being very diverse group of responsibilities, but very dynamic work. And one of the things that dawned on us collectively is that part of the history of any kind of professionalization in any field is that the work has to be ongoing and then eventually recognized so that it can be organized in a particular way. So it can increase the visibility of the profession. And so what has occurred in Illinois, in I believe 2013, is that we had these teacher leader standards. And there were a number of institutions of higher education that wished to offer teacher leader endorsement programs because we moved away as a state from a general Type 75 license where some people would use that endorsement to be a principal or a dean of students or potentially a teacher leader. And so now we had this pocket of individuals who did not wish to go into administration and wanted an opportunity to stay in their schools, in their districts, and in their classrooms. And so we moved to this teacher leader endorsement. But again, it dawned on us that the teacher leader endorsement is not something that should be necessarily only delivered and developed through a coursework-based program, but there's opportunity to, and it makes good sense to deal with this and work through it in terms of competencies. So we took the 7 model teacher leader standards, and what we're in the process of doing, and we'll be doing this in the early fall of next year, is incorporating those into our administrative rules, so individuals who wish to become a teacher leader, who maybe are doing that really important work already, but don't have that credential, can continue to be doing that work and be recognized for their expertise and their professionalism and their commitment to kids in the profession, and receive that endorsement. But to be very clear, in Illinois, there is no requirement in districts for an individual who serves as a teacher leader to have an endorsement in any teacher leader area.
And so, Jason, in the chat room, people are talking about micro-credentialing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little to that?
Sure. So micro-credentialing, I'm not able to see all the comments in the chat room, so forgive me, but micro-credentialing is a way of going about focusing on particular skill sets or competencies that one can demonstrate and then receive a designation or receive a badge. Okay, and so Bloom Board is very involved in doing those right now. I know that there are some other organizations that are also working on that. But in the case of something like teacher leadership, what this could mean is that in order to receive the endorsement, one has to complete the 7 micro-credentials. And for those of you who are not familiar with micro-credentialing, fundamentally what it is, it's the applicant, if you will, receives a syllabus with readings and other sorts of things and directions on the thing that they have to demonstrate competency in. And then that thing is submitted to a group of qualified evaluators. And if the person successfully completes that competency, they would receive that badge. And so one of the things that we have talked about in Illinois is that to take those 7 teacher leader model standards and use those as individual competencies that upon completion of all 7, one could receive the endorsement.
Okay. Well, let me ask our panelists another question. What advice for teacher leaders do you have about how to bring together different groups of people locally at the school site or the district site or at the state level to support teacher leaders? And there have been lots of questions in our chat room right now about people pushing back on teacher leaders or supporting teacher leaders. So this is a perfect question for you as the panelists. Who wants to start? Maybe to ask the panelists what has been helpful. What do you see as the power of ITLN on how teacher leaders could help to bring people together?
Well,
Jason?
this is Linda again. You want to go ahead, Jason?
Oh, go ahead, Cindy, it's fine.
No, go ahead. I went first last time.
Oh, all right. Well, what I realized from working in ITLN, meeting with all these people from different organizations, but coming together around a common cause, a common interest, is I mean, this isn't a very refined thought by any means, but I think one of the most important things one can do initially in terms of thinking about teacher leadership, how it's good for the profession, how it's an advocacy tool for teachers, schooling, children, is to get a bunch of people in the room and start talking through this. Because again, one of the most fascinating things to me about teacher leadership is that there are so many different variations of what it can be in the work that people are doing. And so when people come together, they collaborate, they collectively think through together what these experiences could mean. I mean, good things are bound to happen. And I think that's been evidenced in the work that we are doing in Illinois.
Yeah, I was going to say that when Lynn and Joe, Pam, Annis, I think Steve was there, went to the Teach to Lead, and they came up with this idea to put a group together in their state. Then they came back and put us all in the room and said, what do you think of this? And we tore it apart, put things back together. You know, I think that really got people talking about it and coming to some decisions about it. So some of us went to another Teach to Lead, and it was a whole room full of different people from different parts of the country working on teacher leadership in totally different ways. We are trying to develop a statewide network. One group was from Philadelphia, and it was a group of teachers and administrators trying to increase minority teaching staff, male minorities teaching staff in their school. Another was working on classroom, curriculum, and I mean, there were probably 20 or 30 different ones. So I think that just coming together with an issue that is really affecting a school and having people start talking about ways to work on that can be very powerful. I don't think that a principal has to develop the teacher leader, but I think a principal has to promote and embrace the concept of it. If you do not have a distributive kind of leadership from administration, to me, that's a huge key to make this work.
And Roger, are you there? What advice would you have for teacher leaders in working with different groups around teacher leadership? Particularly school boards and administrators.
Well, I think that the key is to, I guess, to put it a little analogy, sports analogy, is kind of keep your eye on the ball. And, you know, to me, the key to shared leadership has to do with what everyone's goal is. And if everybody is on the same page, which I think we've really coalesced well around the idea that there is a tremendous amount of potential and talent to improve teaching and learning, that benefits everyone. So if you have a theme or a focus, it's easy to support something that everyone's going to be interested in, that everyone has, a stake. And from the school board perspective, obviously, whenever you begin to talk about quality public education, the environment that you create that supports quality public education through teaching and learning improvement, that really kind of became what we focused on. And in fact, even the legislation, the components necessary to build a program to endorse, or an endorsement even, or a college program has to do with supporting teaching and learning. So I think that's really a key, is to make sure everyone is striving for the right thing. And it's, in Illinois at least, I think it's been our collective effort to look at how we can support each other at the end of the day, to support teachers so that we can improve achievement.
So we've seen some questions in the chat room talking about compensation for different roles for teacher leaders. And I'd share that in a research study I just published, we did look at that it depended on what type of roles and how the system was set up. Most of it was set up as stipends for teachers for the work they did in the summer or before after school. But in some instances, and Pam can talk more about Iowa also, we also looked at Iowa, which we looked at that there were some that were full-time teacher leader coaches. And so then those were full-time stipends in the teacher leader, in the teacher's salary schedule. But at our past ITLN meeting, we had a wonderful conversation recently about how time is money. So when teachers would say they wanted the time over money, the idea is it's still how do districts make decisions for that time, because they're all trying to take pieces of the school budgets. So I'd let Pam jump in about Iowa, if you would like.
Sure. So I organized a field trip. Teachers love to organize field trips. So I organized a field trip for our P20 Council in Illinois to go spend a day in Iowa. And we went there and we spent a day in Cedar Rapids in 3 different school districts. And then we interviewed the teacher leaders and the principals and the students. And then we also had an opportunity to meet with their Department of Education to collaborate and ask them questions. And I have to say about the compensation issue, I know in Illinois that may not be possible in some districts. So I wanted to hit on that during the interview. So I asked some of the teacher leaders, well, actually every interview we were in, I asked them this question, that if that compensation went away, that extra $10,000 that they were making as a teacher leader, if they were told that they weren't going to receive that stipend anymore, would they remain in that role or would they want to go back into the classroom? And one of their comments stood out to me, that it was about the outcome and not the income. And they would absolutely stay in that role.
And that was what we found in the research study that we did with NSTOI called Career Advancement Initiatives, was that the teachers were committed to the work, and that each of the sites that we looked at all came up with different ways of figuring out how to use their budgets or soft money and grants to do that. But that is the big issue as you're bringing it in. All right, let me move to our panelists, if they would, to look at if there's any key message points for teacher leaders that they should stress when they're talking to all the different educational organizations about teacher leadership. Or when you talk about teacher leadership, what is it that you stress? What are the key points? So Roger, we may be starting with you first because Cinda and Jason already started first. On other
Okay,
questions.
that's fine. Yeah, I think the key points that I try to stress is, again, and I don't want to be redundant on this, but what a terrific potential there is and how much incredible talent that we have in our schools, that if we can develop a program to use it, especially in a more formalized and trained manner, that it can really make a difference in the culture being more collaborative and more of a distributive administrative model where there is input and decision making, and you just kind of create a better culture when you have that type of a shared collaboration. So I think we need to stress that this is really about working well together for what's best to support teaching and learning, and involving teachers in the development of especially the mentoring and the induction of our young teachers. Just really, I get excited about that possibility, because in Illinois, not unlike a lot of states, we really have some issues with funding. So we have to use the talent that we have to the greatest degree possible under these kind of conditions.
Jason or Cinda?
So I'll respond to the second question. When you talk about teacher leadership, what do you think is important to stress with other stakeholders? Again, like Roger, I don't want to keep on reiterating the same point over and over, but it is really important that I think individuals understand that the teacher leader is one who both cares deeply about the art and practice of teaching and learning, cares deeply about students and providing them opportunities, and cares deeply about working in spaces that are, well run, that there is a distributive leadership, that people have responsibilities, and that the teacher leader is not trying to take anything away from an administrator or anything away from a teacher, but rather is really trying to use his talents, ideas in such a way to help the school community and school culture.
I agree with the comments already made. I think that I always stress that there has to be a culture in the school or the district that is a real belief in distributive administration and collaboration, shared decision making. There has to be a willingness on the part of everyone to look at ways that teachers' expertise can be shared and embraced throughout. And it has to then have the correct way to choose people. And obviously pay has to be looked at. But, you know, with the state of our state budget and lack of money, we really can't wait on funding. I mean, I've been in education 43 years. I've been waiting, as many of you have. So we have to find those ways that it may not be that someone's released entirely from the classroom, but that there are things that they are doing that help others in the practice. And you know, I think that we are still asking ourselves a lot of questions, and building a sustainable culture within a building or a district on many different levels happens all the time and continues to be worked on. I just think that, well, I have watched over the years, and myself included, people who leave the classroom because they want to do some different work, or some because they need to make more money. Well, and some because they feel that doing the work outside of the classroom that helps with the policy and practice is really where they feel engaged. We just need to find these pathways to have teachers use their passion and their expertise to really move forward on student achievement.
Thank you, Cinda. Jason? Oh, I'm sorry. Pam?
Well, interestingly, when we were working on our statewide toolbox a few weeks ago, we were working with a principal from Illinois, and halfway through the day, he turns to me and says, "What is teacher leadership?" So then, you know, we engaged in this conversation, and I think that we need to look at teachers as experts. They're experts, you know, in their classrooms, and they know their students, and to tap into that expertise to drive decisions in the school district and across the state, and then also to give them more voice in their school districts and state and more choice in what's happening. And I feel like, and one of his responses at that time was, "Do you think that it adds work to my teacher's plate, because I really don't feel like I can do that to them right now?" And I said, "I actually feel like teacher leadership increases the capacity of teachers in administration. It's supposed to take off work from their plates and they need to see the value of that teacher leadership position, that formal teacher leadership position. And then, you know, we just need to continue to educate those around us on what teacher leadership is. So just like I'm working with this principal, building this toolbox, and he's questioning what it is. And I think that's part of our job, is to get that communication out there as to what it looks like in the teacher leader model standards. And like Jason said earlier, it's not a one box fits all. It's different for everyone. And then an earlier question about how do you get administration on board? I think that that's true in some cases. And in my background, the district that I worked in, my old district, it was the teachers wanting more voice and choice and maybe getting the pushback from administration. And now in this new district I'm in, it's the exact opposite, where the superintendent, the principals, all added these teacher leadership roles into the district, and teachers are getting back. They don't understand, why do we have these new roles? So it's all about communication and educating others and continuing those conversations about how this will benefit students, because that's what we're all here for.
All right. I'd like to just, we're getting close to the end, but I'd like to take a couple minutes for people to engage in the chat room on what your key ahas are learning tonight. I see there's lots of discussion going on in the chat room. What are you thinking about? Please jump into those. And let's take about a minute or two, including the panelists, if they want to jump into the chat room. And then we'll come back and have a little conversation about what's been going on there. So as we're looking at the chat room, I'm seeing lots of conversations about how do we do it and how do we do it now? And I love Renee's statement, practice slow to play fast. I would think that that is something that I'm constantly monitoring myself on, because I want to have the big total systemic change to the state yesterday, but it takes time. And I believe that we keep talking about bringing everybody together. We're very lucky that we have kind of a grassroots approach going on in ITLN. And I look for that in school districts. How do teacher leaders help to find out what other districts are doing, what other schools are doing? How do the teacher leaders then work with all the stakeholders? And that's something that's very key to me and how we're going to be able to move forward. Any other thoughts from what people are reading in the chat room, or does somebody want to unmute and bring in a topic or discussion that you think is very key to what we're talking about?
I think this is Jason. There have been a number of comments about teacher leaders cycling in and out of being in leadership roles, and the necessity for that to occur in order to get new ideas and so forth. And a point that has been brought up in a couple of our meetings was really thinking about how can you assist a teacher candidate, one who has yet to be licensed, in beginning to embody the possibilities of what could be in terms of teacher leadership, because certainly that might not be something that they're ready to do day one in their first year in the classroom, or there's even, in the second year of their classroom. Of course, that does not, always have to be the case, but thinking about this in, not that this was what it was occurring tonight, but instead of in a linear fashion, if one goes from teacher to teacher leader, thinking about it in more of a cyclic, 3-4 dimensional way, I think is important.
Okay, well, let me start to bring us to a close here by just sharing with you this kind of graphic that I'm kind of excited about. It's taken me a while to get to this point, but I feel like the Illinois Teacher Leader Network is all of these member organizations coming together and having the leaders of those organizations working together and setting up the goal that we've created. I think Cinda has said it a few times, but to build that sustainable culture of teacher leadership in Illinois. But one thing that's key for all of us to understand is how exciting it is to work with a group of people that do come together openly and honestly sharing their ideas, but all committed to that goal. But that there are some things that our network can do, and we do it when the groups all come together. But what I see as the real power is that we're building that culture of leadership within our own little network that will then expand to all these different networks through those organizations, and that through their niche, they will be able to have an impact on teacher leadership. So there were many questions about ESSA, and that's a whole nother webinar. And we could have everybody talking about that at length. But what I would say is that is the next steps for each of our organizations in their niche, and then possibly to discover what we can do as a network in the future. So are there any last 1-minute statements from any of the panelists?
Let me just jump in there, because Joe did ask in the chat room about ESSA, and I know Jason has some ideas about this. We have a lot of opportunity to get together and figure out how teacher leaders and teacher leadership fits into what will become kind of a more flexible approach using some of the resources from the federal government. And I think we really need to take advantage of that flexibility at the state and local level as much as possible, support this notion that we have talent to invest in right in our schools.
This is Jane. I haven't said too much, but I just this has been so informative for me. I'm the government relations advisor for INSTOY, and we're going to have another webinar in 2 weeks to talk specifically about ESSA and the opportunities there to build teacher leadership and to build the profession. So this is so helpful and really enlightening for me to see how you all are leading the way in Illinois. So I just want to thank all of you. And I hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks.
All right, Cinda or Pam or Jason, any comments at the end?
Just keep talking about it, looking at it, because there's so much that can happen.
I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity for letting us to share our ITLN work, because we're very proud of it and we're always excited to share.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And I'll end with the same thing. Thank you all for your engagement in the chat rooms and in the webinar. And thank you to Lori for all her help. And a particular thanks to the panel. And another panel member who isn't really on screen here, but is Joe, who has been managing all kinds of conversations in the chat room. So thank you very much. And let's go forth and spread teacher leadership. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.